right, we just saw it. We saw the Knicks pull off a massive game 1 victory on the road against the Celtics in overtime, big time play down the stretch. They completed a 20-point comeback to win this one. Not an easy feat at all when you are playing in Boston, one of the most hostile environments for any away team in all of sports. You see the title of the video. I'm going to talk about Jalen Brunson and what he has been able to do, not just with this game, but for the postseason as a whole, and really the postseason ever since he's been in the postseason in general throughout the course of his NBA career. So if you're looking at this game, unreal fourth quarter performance, right? Just hitting shot off the dribble after shot off the dribble, was completely taking advantage of Boston out on the perimeter. There were a couple of plays where he was just cooking out Horford off the switch. I felt like later down the stretch in that fourth quarter, Boston did a bit of a better job trying to slow him down in that area, but it was a little too late because his play down the stretch was why the Knicks were able to hone in on this lead and make it manageable and ultimately win the game down the stretch. I know he missed a potential game-winning shot in the fourth quarter. It was like a layup floater at the rim that kind of went in and out, but he was still unbelievable. It really is a prove it type of moment for him, because if you're talking about that clutch player of the year award that he ended up winning, I said that there was nobody else in conversation for that award. I know there are always going to be 3 finalists for it, but I think the gap between him, Nikola Jokic, and Anthony Edwards for that particular award in that conversation, it was pretty large, and it just continuously gets proved each and every game in the postseason, right? Like, you see these guys have these amazing performances and win these awards, and sometimes you wonder in the playoffs, are they able to actually uphold that, right? So, for example, MVP awards. We've seen a ton of guys win the MVP award for the regular season, but they get into the playoffs and they're not really able to follow up on that, right? And prove that their MVP play can actually translate into the playoffs. Good example, maybe Russell Westbrook, right? If you're looking at him in 2017, amazing regular season, gets into the playoffs, isn't bad, but it's just really, really inefficient, and they end up losing in the first round. There were some seasons where we were having questions about James Harden. There were some seasons where we were having questions about Giannis, where he would win the MVP award during the regular season, but in the playoffs, his weaknesses were exposed on a large level, ultimately before he ended up winning his first title in 2021. So we see that happen all the time, where these players have these amazing regular seasons and win these awards, but they're getting to the playoffs and they're not really able to uphold that, right? Or at least prove that they can translate that play into the playoffs. Not the case at all with Jalen Brunson, right? He wins Clutch Player of the Year award for the regular season, comes into the playoffs and proves that he is flat out the best clutch player in all of basketball. And right now, I just don't think there's a question, right? The things that he is doing late down the stretch in these fourth quarters, not just this season, but throughout the entirety of his playoff career, it has been flat out unbelievable. We talk about Jimmy Butler. We talk about Donovan Mitchell. We talk about guys who we look at as these amazing playoff risers over the years. Jamal Murray is in that conversation as well. Jalen Brunson has been one of the marquee playoff risers throughout the entire league. If we want to get into statistics, there are just some ridiculous ones that are out there right now on Jalen Brunson. The gap between him and the next guy when it comes to the most fourth quarter points scored throughout this postseason is absolutely ridiculous. He is at 77 fourth quarter points this postseason. The next guy would be Kawhi Leonard at 45. That is a ridiculous gap. Again, just proving this idea that nobody has been better down the stretch in big time clutch games than Jalen Brunson. If we want to talk about the larger, more broader scope of things instead of just this season, there's this really interesting stat. There's only been 3 players to score 75 plus fourth quarter points through their first 7 games of a postseason run in the play-by-play era, and that is Jalen Brunson, then Stephen Curry, and Kobe Bryant. So we are already seeing that he is getting into some elite territory when we are talking about that down the stretch fourth quarter play. It is extremely special, especially for a guy who, let's face it, when he was coming into the NBA draft, wasn't extremely ridiculously high on a lot of guys' draft boards, especially at the point guard position. Brunson was drafted 33rd overall, right? And really did not have the archetype for a lot of guys that we're seeing getting drafted very highly at the point guard position. Isn't extremely athletic, right? Doesn't have these ridiculous measurements from a body standpoint, and still breaks these rules and breaks this mold of what GMs think works as a point guard to build a team around, and is doing these things. Even look at how old he was when he came into the league. Jalen Brunson did a few years in college before coming into the league and dominating. Even his path to being where he's at right now was really unconventional. Starts off as a backup point guard for the Mavericks and just rises in his role for that team. The way he's been able to build himself up has been really unique and rather unconventional. I think it's been one of the better stories out of any NBA player in the league today. So we'll see what ends up happening the rest of the way down for this postseason, but I'm extremely impressed by the play of Jalen Brunson. Again, just proving why he is looked at as the most clutch player in all of basketball, continuously showing that he is this unreal, unguardable offensive force. There are a few players right now who attract double teams quite like Jalen Brunson, and for him to be doing it as a relatively undersized player is quite interesting. But again, there are still some things that he has to prove. He hasn't made it out of the second round of the playoffs just yet. This is just one game, and it is one game against a Boston Celtics team that can go off and is going to be very tough the rest of the way down. They just won a championship, so we'll see, right? Consistency is going to be key. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but regardless, Brunson has been off the chain so far, not just with his play this postseason, but his play in the postseason in general throughout the course of, again, this really unique, unconventional, strange, shouldn't be working career.